Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IRISSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama, Mr. Jamie University, with his professional microphone. It is going to work today. We have troubleshooted. We think it's going to work today, so we're just going to give it a go. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It is Thursday, May 25th. Today it is May 25th, and we're going to do a vibe check, Jamie. I told you before the show, I feel a little off. I feel like things aren't the way that you want them to feel right now in all aspects, really. And I don't know why. And we were kind of kicking around, some ideas before the show, like maybe I shouldn't feel this way. And so we'll talk about that. So we'll look at recruiting. We'll look at the program at large. We'll look at all those things. So that's what we're going to talk about. Thank you, everyone, for joining the show. If this is your first time listening to our program, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And let people know, hit the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you want to catch us on just audio format, our podcast links are below in the description. And so you can check us out there. Joe Bro, before the show starts, the standard is the standard, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about on the show today. But you know where the vibes are completely immaculate, Jamie? At ESQclothing.com, where the vibes are always, yeah, exactly. They're always, you're always feeling good when you're wearing ESQ, Ga Wang's ESQ bamboo shirt. Your dress shirt, the nicest dress shirt you'll ever wear. You'll never have any complaints about it. Has stretch, wrinkle resistant, odor resistant, feels good, feels smooth, light, airy. Always feels good on the body. So check out ESQclothing.com. Marcus Freeman's wearing it all over the country. And we all know his vibes out and about are always where you want them to be. So check out ESQclothing.com. Upgrade your shirt game ahead of the season. And all right, before we get started, what is the worst Notre Dame loss that you remember taking in? Just like you were afterwards, you were so mad, upset. Just what's the top of your head? Top of mind.
Man, I gotta say, two top of mind. 2011 Michigan.
Yes.
God, that was a bad one. And 2014 Florida State.
Oh, 2014 Florida State. So that was a day
because you felt that Notre Dame had won.
Yeah. So and my daughter, our first child was born the day before. And it was like a whole thing because she had to go to the NICU for some minor complications. And so we were going back and forth. We were on like no sleep that day. And I thought when Golson hit Robinson in the corner and the way they were going to win the game, for a second there, I thought she was like the divine child, like bringing greatness onto Notre Dame football. And then a second later, it was taken away by the cheating referees who didn't know what they were calling and they didn't know who it was on. And then they tried to reconfigure it afterwards. Like some people said it was on Procise, some people said it was on Fuller, some people said, well, it doesn't even matter because we've decided that it's going to be a penalty. And that was unfortunate, Jamie. And I will go to my grave saying it was not a penalty and Notre Dame was cheated on the play. And I count 2014 Florida State as a win. But you brought up 2011 Michigan, and I put out on Twitter yesterday. I've told this story a few different times on a few different platforms, but that is the worst for me because we were at a game watch for my wife's new job. She had just moved to Los Angeles. We started dating. She lived in New York. She was in the process of coming back to Los Angeles. She had just started a new job. There was a friends of ours or a coworker of hers. They are Notre Dame fans. The wife, she went to Notre Dame with my wife. And so they were at Notre Dame at the same time. It's like, oh, come to a game watch. There's like 20 people there. Never met them before ever. Right. So it was just first time meeting everybody. And it's like the way it was a tension for me personally, because A, Michigan, B, under the lights for the first time, C, the way that they had blown the game against South Florida the week before. Right. That was a total disaster. Up 24-7, things start to unravel. And I'm now starting to unravel at this party of strangers Okay. And my wife, I mean, we weren't married at the time. We were just dating for like a year. And making a complete scene, screaming, yelling at the TV. And then after they completely blow it, I'm sitting in a corner, not talking to anyone, like a complete sourpuss. And she's looking at me like, get up, like you stop, like stop. And I'm like, I can't, I'm done. Like I can't, I won't, I'm, this is too important. What just happened? And so that's the one that is really not good.
I was a brutal one. I've been doing this job for a while now, so I don't want to say that I'm not a fan of Notre Dame football anymore, because I still am. That part doesn't go away completely, but obviously prior to doing this, I was like a fan who got really invested into games and results of games, where like if they lost, my night was ruined, or my next few days were ruined, whatever. And I have similar story with my wife, who was then my girlfriend just when we started dating. For the Bush Push game, and that was it was a rough one. And I guess I knew that she was in for the long haul after how I acted after that game. So it all worked out.
Yeah, and so those are the things that you go through, and I think you need to go through as a couple, frankly, so that right, like they're going to be there, because these are our worst moments.
Yeah.
Getting all butthurt about a game involving college students. But hey, look, these things, if it matters, it matters, and I don't think anyone should apologize for that. If you care about it, you care about it, and that's the way it is. So. All right, I just wanted to lead off with that. I told some people I would tell that story.
I will say Nick Gruel here mentioned the 2019 Michigan game, and obviously I wasn't like a fan there. But I was there covering that game. So I was at the Big House that night in the press box, and it was the rain was bad. It was like ugly that whole time. So, and it was just, if you want to talk about bad vibes, that was just the worst vibes ever. And Matt obviously was at that 2017 Miami game that Pops McGee brought up. And that the vibes it was like different vibes for that, because it was like almost like scary vibes, because there was like some like weird violence and stuff from their fans like before the game. But that Michigan game was just like, it was just like a ball rolling down the hill, and everything went wrong. Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember, but I'm pretty sure that game is the last time that I had to go outside. Like I can't because my parents were
walk
over,
the dogs,
and everyone was kind of open. Well, it was because we have a TV in the garage, so it's like I'll go watch in the garage away from everyone. I can't do this, because right after Jonathan Jones did the thing with the punt, he tried to jump on it, and it's one of those like
that was pretty much the turning point.
As a football player, like everyone kind of knows, like, oh, ball blocked. And people think like, oh, since it's blocked, it's a good play for us, so we can kind of do whatever. If the ball goes beyond line of scrimmage, it's a punt. It's all it is a punt. It's a tip punt. You have to treat it the same kind of way. And you can tell like he's going after it.
Peter, get away.
Yeah. Like fire, whatever the word is, like get away. And you're watching him and you're thinking, please don't. And as he's doing it, and it's like, oh my God. And so that's no good. All right. So that's a good kickoff to the Vibe Show right there. Talking about our worst memories of Notre Dame losing games. But all right, so let's start with the recruiting part of it. Okay. And I think I kind of started on this kind of thought process yesterday. This is what we're going to talk about with the show. Owen Waffle decommits from the class. and so it's kind of like, okay, Notre Dame felt like there's a better player that they want at the position, right? Parted ways is the way that, it's kind of being framed there. And everyone's kind of thinking, okay, they're going to move on to this Sean Sevillano guy, interior defensive lineman from Florida. And he's 6'2", 300 pounds, right? So you understand that part of it, right? Like the size. You want that size. Like they were after TJ Lindsey. They were after they're after Justin Scott, and they're both kind of that body type. TJ Lindsey looks like he's trending away, so you want to replace that kind of body type, right? And so you think, okay, if we can land, we want to land Sevillano, we want to land Justin Scott. Do we need 3 on that with that body type, playing that position, playing the 1? And they decided no, and so they want to go after those 2 guys. And so Owen Wafel is not in the class anymore. First of all, what is your take on that? Just the 2 players. How do you evaluate those 2 players? Do you feel like this was just do you feel like that is do you understand what Notre Dame is doing there?
I get it because, well, one, I'm not 100% sure it wasn't kind of like a mutual, so like an actual parting of the ways rather than
the idea is Wafel might have been, his eye might have been
I think that might have happened, and then Notre Dame was like, okay, then then we can just move on.
Yeah.
And so I'm not like, I don't know for sure. So, but I think that could have been. I think that could have been based on how quickly the Michigan visit came about and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Definitely got vibes from that. And I also think that, so, and just to add on to that is that I think he's a good player and a good prospect. But he's not the kind of guy that you're like, oh, he's going to go take a bunch of unofficials. Like, there's a difference between when Peyton Bowen, we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to stick in it with Peyton Bowen and just kind of go with this. Where like last year's, I would say with like Jaden Lamar, they should have just been like, okay, we're done. Like he wasn't that good.
Yeah.
They should have done that with Lamar last year and just said like, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we're just going to move on. And that's the case. That's the case. So I think that, he's kind of Waffle or Wafel. Sorry. I don't know how to correctly pronounce his name either. Let's just say it's Wafel for now. If that was the case, then yeah, that totally makes sense. I will say that, I mean, he's definitely a better player now than Sevillano.
Mm-hmm.
He's smaller, so he has to put on weight, but he has put on some weight, and he's got a big frame. Like, I don't doubt that he's going to be able to put on that weight. I like him as a prospect. Like, I would call him, like, I think like Harrison Phillips was kind of my comp for who he could be. So, and that's basically like a rich man's Kurt Heinisch.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a good player. You would want him. In saying that, could they get somebody better? Yeah, they could. Could Sevillano be better? He could be. The thing with Sevillano to me, and I was talking a lot with this yesterday with Matt Freeman, and there's a lot to like about him in terms of he moves incredibly well for a guy who's 300 pounds.
That's true.
I think he's, and I think he's actually around like 320 right now. Like so that's another thing. He's big, but it's a sloppy 320. He is going to be a guy. My question for him, and you see how he plays, and there's a lot of like really good, and then there's also some plays where it's like he kind of takes some plays off technique wise,
right.
And they let him do some stuff in their defense that like is totally not translatable to how any way he could play at Notre Dame or any school. Like, he will get destroyed if he plays like that. So, but you can get away with it in high school,
What can you tell me about where he plays, because some of the clips in there, like that's someone's child. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they did not there's some little guys that he's going up against.
Okay, my understanding is that Clearwater Academy kind of plays like a wide range of schools, so that's why you can see like some of the stuff. You know, some of the teams that they play, it's like, you know, you got some guards where it's like, this guy's a 200-pound guard, and they're like, oh, this guy looks like the same size as him. Like, that's why there's that gap. It's like, it's just a wide variety. So that stands out. So that's also too why you see, like, I think he had like his numbers. He's got like 50 tackles or 40 tackles for loss or something ridiculous, right? And you're like, okay, that's just like insane. But some of that is because of the comp that they play, right? But yeah, you should be dominating that. And I think for the most part he does. And he also plays offensive line. So he plays like a ton of snaps too. So I think, you know, that's another thing when you have to look at it. If a guy's playing like both ways and he's playing like all the time, like, yeah, guys are going to take plays off. That's part of it, right? But in saying that, he's going to take some time. I think his ceiling is higher than Wafel's.
Yeah,
that's what I would say. His ceiling is higher. He is definitely more of a sure thing. Like, this guy's going to be a nose, but he doesn't play like a nose right now. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of stuff leverage wise, even though it's like people think, oh, he's 6'2", so, you know, he's going to play. No, he doesn't always play with good leverage. His hands are, you know, he's very raw with his hands. He's obviously, he's a Canadian guy. He's from Winnipeg, Manitoba. You know, it's not the level of football there. I mean, the level of coaching specifically, he wouldn't have got great coaching.
Right.
You know, the odds are he might have like fluked out a, like, he, you know, had like some ex CFL guy that coached him or something like that. But I mean, from the looks of it doesn't look like he did. So, and to me, it doesn't look like he's getting the best coaching at his high school, you know? And I don't like to say this kind of stuff, because it's like, it feels like I'm taking shots, but I mean, I just try to tell it like I see it, right? Like,
I think there's a difference. And I think, you know, this too. There's a difference in high school between getting good coaching and getting the type of coaching that it's like, this is setting you up to be a Division I prospect. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I see that there's so much of that, like, and this is like totally like super lower level, right? But like, so my daughter's team, she plays club soccer. Like, when she was in ASO, which is basically just the youth program that every city has. Like, when she was in that, like, she had some good coaches that we were very happy with. And she goes to club, and then it's completely different, you know? So, and I think, so there are some high school programs that are like, you're getting good coaching from these guys, right? They're not like doing you dirty. Like, it's not like they're not doing a good job. And then you're getting good, solid coaching. There's other programs where it's like, hey, these guys are on another level. Like, they could be working somewhere at a college, right? Like, they could be at that level, but they just happen to be in high school. I think that's probably what you're talking about. When we talk about like coaching, just like, oh, he's not getting the coaching. It's like, Notre Dame, we're preparing you to play at Notre Dame type level coaching. That sort of thing.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. And it's not even to say, like, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I don't personally, I don't care about like the guys, these records of these teams and stuff like that. I'm not really looking at that. I mean, it's a bonus if a guy plays for like a state champion or something like that. You know, comes from winning culture. That's always a good thing. But I mean, I'm not watching a film of a guy and being like, you know, worried about the score of the game, right? I'm not worrying about that kid.
I did see that he was in his highlights. He was standing up from like a nose guard position.
Yes,
and I know you hate that. I loved it.
Well, and then it's like, so that's where it comes back to coaching too. I'm like, you're either coaching this, which is you're terrible. Get out of here forever. Don't ever coach defensive line. Leave forever. That's the door. Or you're allowing it to happen, which is just as bad. So, so I guess I am taking shots at their coaches. Like, that's not good. That's not good. That's not helping him. And I frankly, that doesn't really even help your team that much.
Yeah.
Because when it comes down to it, when you play the best competition, you can't get away with that.
Right.
So if you like cheating it against someone who's worse, that doesn't help, right?
Yeah.
So watch him. He's a big man. He's got great feet. We're talking about Sean Seviano, who's a defensive tackle, a guy who Notre Dame has an offer. He's going to take a official visit, and that's the guy that people think that like is going to replace Wafel in the class.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about, Rick Henry. I do think that he has a chance to be really good. Like he's got like disruptive qualities about him in terms of like, just when you see a big guy who can run like that, that's unique, right? That's unique. That's why he has a Notre Dame offer, Ohio State offer. He's got some big time offers. He's got like, if you care about offer lists, then and we know some of the people who are commenting here too, then you'd be like, okay, I don't care what his ranking is, right? Because of that. But the reason he's kind of ranked where he's at as a kind of like a high 3-star kid is because he's not a guy who's going to be able to step in to wherever he is right away. And that can also change because there's a senior year. I don't know what he's going to do this summer in terms of like losing weight and putting on the right weight, whatever. So you got to kind of see that. But like, if he comes in to Notre Dame or someplace like this now, it's going to take him time to like, he'll have to like lose 30 pounds of fat basically and like put on another like 20 pounds of muscle. Like that's kind of like where he's at really. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think, and of course, if you're Notre Dame and you just look at a guy like Jason Onye, right? I mean, raw as can be when he came to Notre Dame, didn't play a senior year of high school football in Rhode Island, nonetheless, too, where it's like Rhode Island football, I would say, just from watching kids from Rhode Island that Notre Dame has recruited over the years, to me, that is like, it is pretty much on par with like, you would say like kids from Canada, like in general, like it's not a high level overall, and you're not going to see too many D1 kids that you're going against. And so I don't know, like, I mean, and the coaching, it just depends on the where you're at. Right. But obviously with Onye, you could see there was tools there. Like the guy's got like, he's super long. He's got the frame. He's got all these things, but he was very raw in a lot of ways. And so even last year, like you have to give so much credit, first of all, to him. He put in a ton of work to work hard and get better and to reshape his body and all this kind of stuff. And now he's got like, whatever percent body fat way down and he's like shredded. He's shredded. He's 290 and he's shredded. And so you give credit to Matt Bayless and you got to give a ton of credit to Al Washington because he was super duper raw last spring. And it was like, you could say, like, oh, this guy plays hard, but he looks like he's far away, but he's got a shot. And now you're like, oh, he's going to be in the rotation. So, but in saying that, it's his third year and he's going to be in the rotation. And that's what I would kind of see for a guy like Seviano, unless he already makes like some big improvements before. So that's the way that I kind of look at it is you're like, okay, you're betting on maybe the long-term with a guy like that, and then long-term, yeah, he could be better than Wafel for sure. But if I'm a kid like Wafel is a kid that I would see probably having a better shot to be a rotation guy in like year 2 or something, right? So, and you're kind of weighing that. It's just, and it's a little bit like too, like where there's some guys with like better raw tools than Clarence Lewis, but I mean, Clarence Lewis could not even play this year. And that would have been a tremendous take for Notre Dame because he played a ton of football in a pretty like, like at above average level, right? I know people don't love him. Some people think he's trash because he got beat a bunch of times and played too much in that 2021 season. That's not his fault. You know what I mean? Like that's just the situation. It's not his fault. He had to play as a true freshman, but the fact that he was ready to play as a true freshman above the other guys who were actually higher ranked than him says a lot about like the kind of player he is. So it's like, what kind of, and I wrote about this in 6 Thoughts the other week, where there's like a value. There's a value in terms of what a guy's ceiling is. And there's a value in terms of, well, you only get so many years in the program. So when is this guy going to actually play?
Yeah.
Right. And so you got to kind of weigh that. And I don't know if they think that like, hey, we can get this guy to play and we love his, like, he loves football. This guy just hasn't had the right exposure. He hasn't had the right coaching. Once he gets in here, this is whatever. Then, I mean, it could be a tremendous take and it could be like a great take. But to me, he's like a developmental guy.
And so that's tough because it's just like you said, and we've kind of talked about it before. It's harder now taking developmental guys because it's so easy just to leave, you know? And so like when you juxtapose it versus someone like Wafel, like you said, like if he can come in and play, you know, he's going to be playing in year 2 or year 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, then it's like, you can kind of count on him being in your program, you know? So that obviously they have to weigh those things. Right. And two, we are now assuming, right. And you alluded to it before, like we're assuming that Notre Dame, what provided the impetus for this. We don't know that, right? Like, did Notre Dame catch wind of the fact that he was talking to Michigan? Like, did they know
Might have been,
that he's kind of wavering around and maybe we're lukewarm now? And so maybe it's just better for everyone to move on. We don't know the specifics of that. And he didn't hint at anything like negative in the post that he put out either. So
very positive about Notre Dame.
Right. So maybe it truly was like people were moving in different directions. Right. Yeah. And so we're framing it around this was Notre Dame's choice. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We're just kind of looking at both prospects here. Drunk Vigo put up a comment that Notre Dame's recruiting is trending downwards. Now, that's sort of it's sort of true and it's sort of not, right? So like if you look at, and Jamie put out in 6 Thoughts today that I recommend everyone goes to read, go to irishsportsdaily.com, go to 6 Thoughts on a Thursday that Jamie wrote, free article. You can check it out. It's not premium or anything. It's always really good, really in depth. You wrote about Notre Dame's blue chip ratio, right? And the first 2 years under Marcus Freeman, they've been at 79%, which is way higher. I mean, Brian Kelly was at 55%. And you said it was his last class, right? And that's not sustainable. And we're seeing that right now, frankly. It is not sustainable. Notre Dame is really not in that great of a situation as far as their roster, like a number of positions, skill positions too. So like wide receiver and safety, just numbers wise, right? Like they're not where you want to be by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. They got very fortunate with the fact that Ben Morrison happens to be like really good. Same thing with Jaden Mickey, right? So those two guys looks like they're going to be players. Looks like Christian Gray is going to be a player. So the last couple of classes have really helped them as far as cornerback, but safety, wide receiver, like these are key spots on any football roster in 2023, right? So they're low there. So you're sitting at 79%. That's really good, regardless of ranking, right? 79% is getting you higher and higher to where you want to be as far as having
great
blue chip ratio. That's really good. This year they're at 11 of 16, okay, which is 69%. Now, obviously that's dipping. They're in on a bunch of guys now who, if you land them, you're getting right back up there to 79% where you've been, right? So on that front, it's like, it's a wait and see. It's definitely a wait and see. But I do understand the sentiment that the vibes are a little bit off there. Like you're banking on, you got to land KVA, right? You kind of got to land Elijah Rushing in terms of just the targets you're after. Justin Scott. Like if you don't land these guys, that's when you kind of get like, I don't know. Like, now I don't know, you know? And that's, are there going to be decommitments, right? And also, like the other part too, is like some guys, they could jump up in the rankings as well, right? We think that's going to happen for a couple of these prospects.
At least a few of them, yeah.
At least a few, right? But like, are there going to be decommitments? Are there going to be people who leave the class? Are they going to add people? Like, so it's not even June yet, right? So we do have to keep that in mind. But it is a little bit murky. It is a little bit murky, Jamie.
Yeah, it is. And so I think that's kind of why, and it's also, you know, it's year 2 and it's coming out of, you know, the first year, which, I mean, obviously for Marcus Freeman, which there was a lot of positives, right? A lot of positives, but you know, the Marshall and the Stanford losses, you know, those those linger until this year when they go and if they don't lose those types of games, right? So that lingers until then. And then it's like, well, you're also like, okay, well, what's the offense going to be? Like, how good's the offense going to be? Right. Like, that kind of lingers. And I think people have high expectations, but they're like, how good is it going to be? Right. How, there's just things there that, and then the finish to the class wasn't, it didn't match the excitement of the beginning of the previous class, right?
I mean, they lost Peyton Bowen.
On
the last day.
That absolutely, and that is just the kind of thing that changes. Well, and Brandon Hillman too.
Hillman.
So it's like if those two guys people feel different about the class, even though they signed 19 kids that were 4 stars in the class out of 23. Which is it's a really good class, right? But it's still not what it also turns into people saying, which I think is ridiculous, but people saying, well, I thought Marcus Freeman was going to improve the recruiting. Like, it's like, yeah, he is actually, but that's people just only judge in the moment of what that is, and that's how it gets kind of caught up with all those things. And it's like, or even yesterday, so Wafel decommits, parted ways, dropped, whatever, right? But it's like a weird thing because it's like, okay, well, are they going to get Justin Scott? Like, that's how it turns into a thing, right? Or like, I'm not sure about Seviano. And like, okay, are they going to get Justin Scott? Well, I see all these crystal balls for Justin Scott to go to Miami. So if they don't get Justin Scott, then people are going to go, believe me. I mean, everyone who has read a Notre Dame message board will know that the first guy who will get brought up with them losing Justin Scott will be Owen Wafel, right?
Right.
That's what's going to happen. So that's kind of where they're at right now. And it almost kind of, and because of that, it almost like takes away from the fact that they landed Logan Thomas yesterday, who is a tremendous prospect, tremendous Viper prospect, chance to be a big time tackle. And if you anyone would swap out him 1-for-1 with Wafel in the class. Like, you just say, like, he's a guy. I mean, he's higher ranked right now from composite ranking. He's got a higher ceiling. There's just a lot to like about him. Right. He's a guy who's on the rise. I think he's another guy who I imagine will continue to rise as a recruit too. So right now, I think he's the 3rd highest ranked guy in the class, which might be by composite rankings. Right. So, but it's like people also see like, well, the good and because they're looking at the other part of it. Right. So, and that's just where things are at for Notre Dame right now. So it's just kind of, and no one wants to wait and see in June, but that's kind of how it is. People have to just kind of wait and see how these official visits go. If they land, let's just say they land half of these really the top guys. I mean, to me, that's like obviously a win, right? That's a win. But if you don't, but it's like there'll be people who perceive it as a loss. You know what I mean? If like Elijah Rushing isn't in there or Justin Scott isn't in there. And that's just kind of where they're at right now. Right. So the vibes will be immaculate if they land Elijah Rushing, that's the way to kind of think about it. So those are the kind of things. And if they landed him and Justin Scott and whatever, I don't need to rehash out. I'm not as high in Justin Scott as everybody else, but just in terms of like industry, it would be seen as like this huge
the buzz. Yeah. The buzz would just be enormous, right? You land 2 5-star defensive linemen. I mean, that would be a big,
that's
kind of
Aaron
earthquake.
Lynch and Stephon Tuitt.
Yeah.
Right. That's that kind of thing. And, that's where, you know, that's the where all of a sudden, believe me, there will be like all of a sudden, you know, Dan Wetzel will write like a column about how Marcus Freeman is killing it in recruiting, like a national, you know, he's Yahoo national columnist, does a great job in covering college football. And like, he would write something about that if they did. It's kind of like how there were like writing stories about that last year when it looked like Notre Dame was going to land Dante Moore, right? Like that's kind of, so things can flip really quickly. And right now it's kind of like, I would say it's like vibes in general for the program. It's like purgatory, you know, they're just right there. It's like, you got to kind of see and let it play out. And then also too, like, you just don't know, you know, Irish invasion's coming up, camp season's coming up right now. So at this time, right, last year, no one knew that CJ Carr was going to commit to Notre Dame at this time. They thought, oh yeah, you know, Notre Dame's doing okay. No one knew he was going to. And then no one knew that, like, oh, and then Cam Williams was going to commit, and then Jack Larson's going to commit, and then eventually Aeneas Williams is going to, like, but that's kind of where like things kind of trended from then, right? Yeah. So you just kind of have to wait and see how it's all going to play out, because if Deuce Knight like ends up like coming to campus and then he commits to Notre Dame before the end of summer, like people.
Oh, you went muted for a second there, Jamie. MNBRG or MNBRPG7. Been listening since the breakdown of Oklahoma State. Great to see the show grow. Never miss an episode. Best coverage of Notre Dame football anywhere. Hey, man, I appreciate that. Or woman, we appreciate that comment very much. That's a very nice thing to say. The Oklahoma State breakdown, that is like way in the early parts of this show, man. Good for you. That's been a long time. Thank you for always supporting us. So here's the thing, and I think that it's hard. Like, so when we talk about like Elijah Rushing and Justin Scott and KVA and guys like that, like the problem that I think that I just have personally is, I don't want to say the problem, the concern that I have. And Marcus Freeman talked, and you kind of put this in your 6 thoughts on a Thursday. Like Marcus Freeman's talking about, I'm going to outwork everybody in a recruiting trail, and I'm going to outwork you, and that's what it's about. I'm going to acquire talent, and that's how we're going to build out the roster. Basically, is we're going to do those things. Jamie's gone for a second; he'll come back in just 1 second, but. Marcus Freeman talks about building out the roster, and he's going to outwork them, right? And that was a perfect plan. Like I felt like in 2020, that's great, right? You're gonna fill out the roster with and you're gonna outwork everyone, and you're gonna bring in all this high-end talent and all those other things, and you're gonna bring on those guys. But then, and we kind of saw that playing out last year with Dante Moore and Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen, right? Marcus Freeman convinced them that Notre Dame was the best option, and ended up landing him for reasons that are like not even within his control. You know, it's NIL stuff, and it's stuff like where people are making deals, you know, and Notre Dame is never going to win that. They are never going to be the highest bidder. They can improve, and they will improve their NIL operation, but they won't be the highest bidder for these guys. So I think and fans, they look at like, okay, Justin Scott, he's looking at Miami. We know what Miami's about in terms of their NIL operation, right? I haven't heard anything like that with Elijah Rushing, but look, he's a 5-star defensive end, Jamie. When push comes to shove in October and November, and teams see what they've got and what they need to do, they're going to be coming after him. It happened last year, right? It happened with a bunch of guys, not even Notre Dame recruits, just all over the landscape of college football. And so I think people are rightly nervous, even if Justin Scott commits tomorrow, what percentage chance do you think, okay, he's going to end up in the class come December? If he commits tomorrow, what is it then? What do you think?
I'd say probably like 80%.
80%. So it's like, even then, it's like, I don't know. Like, would it change, right? Like, would it change at the last second? And that's the concern that people have, right? I think.
Well, actually, it's probably unfair to say that to him, because I think everyone wants.
I'm not even considering him.
Yeah.
But we know that offers are going to come in. We know that it has nothing to do with Justin Scott, the person.
This is why, though, I see it. Justin Scott and Elijah Rushing and those players right now who have not decided yet differently, because I mean, it wasn't like there weren't bagmen before, or there wasn't like NIL wasn't a thing. Like the previous class, A&M, I mean, they spent a lot of money on that previous class, right? So it wasn't like that didn't exist, but it was like last year, it was like it kind of took it to a different level, right? Where that was where all of a sudden, Tennessee bought a quarterback. Miami had John Ruiz, and that was when he really started coming in, right? So things changed, and then Oregon was like really like the organization of NIL collectives and stuff like that. It was completely different. And apologies to everyone too. Like, of course, my mic lasted 40 minutes this time, but then it disconnected. So had to switch to AirPods. But so last year there was a lot of like new, and also Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen were committed for a long time, and it was like target on your back kind of thing of like these guys were going after. And now all of these kids who are going to take a bunch of officials and whatever, right? Like they have these planned. Rick Rushing has officials planned. Justin Scott has officials planned. They've been to a bunch of places, whatever, right? They've already heard pitches. And I'm not saying that someone wouldn't come in over the top, try to get them, but it's like they wouldn't commit to Notre Dame if it was just about the money and all that kind of stuff. If they do make that commitment to Notre Dame, because they're already getting that. They're already getting those offers. So that's why it's a little bit different which is why I don't think which is why it would have actually been a bad thing if Justin Scott would have committed in March 1st or whatever that date that was he was supposed to, and then all of a sudden was like, now I'm going to start taking these. Well, that would have been bad. That would have been like, okay, I think people should count him out, right? But because he hasn't gone through that, now it's like, if he does choose Notre Dame, then I think he's heard it from all these other places, right? I mean, Rushing has heard it from Oregon and heard it, like, you're going to get it. So maybe they lose out on him. And if they do, of course, people are going to cite NIL, and maybe those are driving factors. I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure, but like maybe it is for them. But it's different than it was last year. And also it is different from a perspective where, NIL for Notre Dame it's more competitive is what I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it's more competitive to the point where, like, if you're a top 200 player, or a top 100 player, even top 100 even.
Well,
then it's like, okay, because then it's like you're not getting that like big upfront, agents and all those other things. You're not getting that from like anywhere, right? And so, but Notre Dame's, so then their NIL operation, it's like, hey, you're going to get some money. You're going to get some, right? Like everyone's getting some, right? And so then that makes it like, okay, that's good. But again, like the Bowens, the Rushings, these guys, like they're going to command. It's a different type of, like they're coming in at the end, right? Like Evan Olson says, seemed like at the end of last year, teams found money to sling around. I wonder if their market will cool down as the boosters relax. I think you guys made a good point on Power Hour about you can't keep hitting up these people for money every single year. Like at some point, it's like in the first couple of years, it's like, cool, I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to throw around millions of dollars here. But at some point, it's like, look, these are business people, right? There's doesn't need to be a return on investment. You brought up with Nico. Yeah. Like, if he doesn't start the first 2 years, well, what are you going to do then? You're gonna keep paying him, right? Is that going to be a thing?
Pay him.
Right. So I think there might be a market correction completely that completely benefits Notre Dame in the model that they want to use for NIL. Yeah. Whereas like, hey, like the first couple years, we're just hitting up whoever we can, throw us some money, and then we'll figure out our NIL. Like maybe that was like, hey, I'll do this for a little bit, but you guys got to have like a real operation. And maybe Notre Dame's just spending their time not doing the other part, but getting the real operation going. And if that's the case, then okay, then maybe this isn't a problem in the next couple of years, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just talking about this cycle. I feel like we're not there yet, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the uncertainty comes from. Like what's coming down the pike in October and November?
Well, okay. This is the other thing is that there's obviously some schools that are really investing in transfers.
Yes.
I
Tony Ventitelli brought this up just now. So Notre Dame will self-correct. Okay. Portal is a bigger problem for Indy. So why don't you go into your point, Jamie?
It is in terms of like access to certain players, but that's always going to be Notre Dame just needs it to fix holes if they continue to recruit like they are now.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where they're going to be at. Because if you sign like 75% of the players you sign are 4 and 5 star kids, your roster's going to be healthy. Like, and you retain the kids, for the most part, which Notre Dame, and that's another thing that I wrote about in 6 Talks, like there's 27 4 or 5 stars that have left Oklahoma in the last, from the classes that would be on campus right now. Well, Notre Dame has lost 8 in those. Like, that's, I mean, 8 might seem like, oh God, this is the worst. Like, it's not even close to what's actually going on with some of these teams, right? Like, and so Notre Dame's roster this year is out of the 82 guys, it's like, here, sorry, I'll grab the exact number. So, but I believe it's 60, what do I have it at? It's like 56 of the 82 scholarships, 68.3% of the guys were blue chip recruits. And that's not counting like Sam Hartman, right? But I'm just saying like, whatever, right? So that's, if you're doing that and you're still kind of maintaining that level of the thing, and I think that number will go up. Like it's obviously, it was 63% last year, right? So it's going to be 68.3. Next year, it'll be over 70, whatever, right? And so it's going to keep going up until it kind of levels out around probably around 75 is my guess, right? And so if you're doing that and you're building and developing, like you don't have to hit up the transfer portal as much. You take 4 guys a year, 4 or 5 guys. You take specialists with Notre Dame. It's not like that's what you kind of take. But so for USC last year, right? And USC this year, really, right? So whatever money was directed towards Caleb Williams, right? I mean, it was way more than worth it, right? It was way more than worth it for them.
Yeah.
And even for Jordan Addison, even though he didn't have like this monster year, I mean, he was one of the best receivers in the Pac-12. He was a first-round pick. He definitely made the team much better. It was worth it, right? He didn't win the Biletnikoff, but he was worth it, right? Well, I mean, Bear Alexander is like, they backed up a Brinks truck for him. What if Bear Alexander sucks? He might.
Yeah.
He might actually suck, right? because like, I mean, I read these quotes where he's like, everybody wants the Bear. He's like third personing it already. I'm like, this dude didn't even play. Like, I mean, he couldn't start at Georgia. So it doesn't mean because he couldn't start at Georgia that he's not going to start at USC, but it's like, there's no guarantee this guy's going to be a first round defensive lineman, right? Like he's got to prove a lot. There's no guarantee that Anthony Lucas is. And obviously you're spending to try to get that, but it's like, at some point, if enough of these guys don't turn out, they're going to be like, why are we spending this friggin' money? Like, that is going to happen to some schools. Like, it's like with Mel Tucker, they paid the money for that huge extension.
Yeah.
They did the whole thing, and they had the 1 year where they were like, oh, man, they hit on Kenneth Walker, and they hit on a bunch of the other transfers, and then boom, they're like, they beat Michigan. They're doing all these things. They look like, man, they're just like this program on the rise. And then last year, they sucked. This year, they got the starting quarterback and the top receiver in the portal in the spring, right? Like, I have no idea how they're going to be this year. But if they go like 5-6, or 6-6, I mean, are people going to be really thrilled about where they're at? Like, in terms of like, because they're, putting some money into it. Like, they're going to look at the ROI, right? They're going to look at the ROI.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, there's a lot of stuff that is it's going to, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention it too, but it's going to get all evened out eventually because the smart programs have like a cap of like where they're going to get investment and spend and all that kind of stuff, and like be like, okay, well, this is what we would have for NIL if we're trying to get guys, and also to the guys on the team. Because you got to keep the guys on the team happy. Mm-hmm. Because if somebody's balling out, and if somebody on USC, I mean, probably not based on their roster, but if just say a random guy that they recruited before ends up being a better player than Bear Alexander, he's going to be like, well, where's my money? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's going to happen. Right? So that's something you have to deal with. And that's also too why, like, I don't think Notre Dame will ever want to get into that and will want to still recruit more, because you don't want to get too deep into that where all of a sudden it's like you're paying for a guy. Like, just imagine say like this was the era in like back in 2013 and Max Redfield comes and it's like, well, he didn't really play as a freshman. He didn't play as a freshman. He was, pretty inconsistent that whole time. And you're like, Max Redfield's like getting the most money out of the team or whatever. It's like, well, he wasn't Jalen Smith, like it's all that stuff is stuff you have to balance and have to work with. And I don't think that's, I mean, everything is short term right now. Everything is just like, we got to get the best players and whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't know if all the teams are thinking, 2 steps forward, with all this stuff. I think some teams are going to get burned bad.
Yeah. And it's hard now, like, especially at the end, like during the off season. I mean, this was a really weird off season in terms of just the news cycle, right? Like, it was very strange. Like, they got Hartman. You got Hartman, and then you win the bowl game. And so then you think, okay, like, everything's going great. It's a really good situation. And then even into February, like, everything was going well. And then Tommy Rees leaves, and then the coaching search went the way that it went. Right. And then Harry Hiestand leaves. And then, so then that happens. And then, you get the transfers of Logan Diggs and Tyler Buckner and Lorenzo Styles. Right. And these are all like going into last year, like, these are key players, right? Like, the starting quarterback, the starting running back, the starting wideout, like, they are leaving.
The guy that you thought were the future of your program.
Right. And now they're gone. And we had, there was different information, right? Like, losing them now is not, if it had been last year, it'd have been a huge disaster. And now it's not, right? So, but it's just like, you feel like you're losing guys. Like, Caleb Smith didn't work out, and so you kind of look, and the spring game was great in terms of, like, the guy you really need to look good is Sam Hartman, and he looked great. But beyond that, it just didn't. It after that happened, like, you get a bunch of transfers out, and so that really hurts, like, the the morale of things, and there's been some good additions to Notre Dame's recruiting class that we've talked about. It's not like we're down on the players, right? Like every time they've added somebody, I think we've seen good things, but when you look in the totality of everything, it just feels like I feel like Notre Dame's in a vulnerable position. And that's the concerning part, right? They're very vulnerable at quarterback, for one. They're very vulnerable at wide receiver, right? And so it's just that you feel like it's kind of teetering, and it could teeter in the right direction where it's like you add all these other guys, things work out really well with like the football team, right? Sam Hartman hits, the wide receivers hit, everything gets figured out on defense, right? Like Ben Morrison and the Antonio Carter works out with Xavier Watts and all those other things. The D line makes a big jump, offensive line makes a big jump, and you could see it going one way, but then you could also it's very easy to see it going the other way, and there's an uneasiness there. And that's why I feel like I wanted to have this show to talk about like the vibes are very strange. And so, but that's kind of like, that's the way it goes sometimes, right? And I will note, like every off season where in 2012, right? Those vibes were super weird. Like that was a very strange time. Whereas they had just gone 8-5. 2011 was just an awful result. That was that might be Brian Kelly's worst coaching job. Be ahead of 2016. That team had so much talent. And for him to go through, for them to have the season that they did, that's really bad, right? And so those vibes were weird. Obviously, the 2015 vibes were weird. 2017, 2018, there was so much you didn't know. 2020, it was like who's gonna be wide receiver for Notre Dame in 2020? You just didn't know. And so I feel like this is another offseason where I don't know. There's just a lot unknown. That doesn't always portend to poor results, though, and often goes the other direction.
It is. I mean, I think that's college football in general. I think there's so much stuff that's a crapshoot. That 2018 team, there was so much that said coming back on defense that you were like, the defense is going to be good.
Yeah,
the defense is going to be good. But then it was like, well, Clark Lee's a first-time coordinator. There's a lot of people who are like, I hate this hire. Just because it was unknown, right? I was pretty confident it was going to work out well, but it still was unknown. And that the Brandon Wimbush situation, it was like the guy basically had the yips, and then it was like he still had the yips. And still he started the first game, and they beat Michigan, with it, and they barely won the next two games and managed to go 3-0 and then make a quarterback. That doesn't happen very often.
Dexter Williams was suspended.
Boykin was the guy who was supposed to take that next step, and then he didn't really do much and things. But then it was like, well, and then as soon as Ian Book came on, he started to blow up, right? And there's just so many different things and unknown, and that's why I love college football, because there's stars made every year, and it can be anyone from a guy who's been on campus to this guy's been here for 3 years and he's done nothing, or he's maybe not he's done nothing, but he's never shown a sign that he's going to be a star. Chase Claypool had some moments, but he definitely never had any signs prior to that year, 2019, where you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be one of the best receivers in college football this year. And he's going to, we know he's a freak show, and he's going to play like a freak show. Right? That was not a thing until basically that spring. And then they were and even, Brian Kelly was like, yeah, this guy's got first round pick talent, whatever. But it was they never said that about him before. And it wasn't like he didn't have that talent. They just never said it because he never showed it consistently.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. So you just don't know. And and you can also point in the other direction where there was 4 points in time where Dalen Hayes was supposed to be the next great pass rusher at Notre Dame. And it didn't really happen. And he never, I mean, it never really truly happened, but he didn't really end up being the best version of himself until his last year, right? Because Julian O'Carr kind of like, jumped him, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a weird thing where you just kind of don't know, and health obviously has a lot to do with it. And Diggs is not there, so does it mean Estemi's going to have this monster year or whatever? And it's like, well, what about JD Price? Is the guy actually going to be healthy? Can a guy come back and be the same after? I think there's just so many unknowns, which I'm like, man, let's get to the season. Let's play ball. Like I just want to see it. I'm excited. I'm excited for fall camp this year. Very excited. I'm excited for this official visit season where they're going to have all this stuff. I personally, I don't know how you feel, Greg, but I like the summer officials, and then kind of like seeing where everybody stands, and then being able to reevaluate as you go into the season. And I think for the most part, a lot of programs are kind of like, 75% done their classes right after the summer. So it's a good way to do it. I mean, are they gonna ever flip? I mean, they flipped guys last year, but it wasn't quite the same. It wasn't what people kind of thought, but maybe this year they do flip somebody that's a lot bigger that we don't know about. And man, so it's like, the vibes are weird. It's like, stuck in purgatory right now. But I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah, the summer officials is always a good time because there's a ton of information that comes out of it. Generally, there's just a lot of juice, right? And that's fun, right? It's fun to talk about. Like recruiting can sometimes be a drag a little bit, just because there's an information vacuum that you're trying to fill. But in the summer, when the summer officials come, that's not the case. Like usually that's when like Matt and Christian do such a great job of getting information. Like we have a lot to discuss. Things start happening. It's a good time. It's a good time. So you're going to want to tune in to Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com, where we're going to be talking about all those things. There's a good, I'm not going to touch on it too much just because everyone's kind of being chill in the chat, but there's a good conversation going on in there that I commend everybody for. So thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to wrap it up for today. We're going to be back next week, probably talking about more recruiting stuff, probably talking about more team stuff. We'll come up with maybe like a fun top 5 for everyone to talk about. Maybe we'll do another mailbag, Jamie. Maybe we could do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could
we could do a list. I like the list thing.
We like lists, mailbag, hot take Tuesday, something like that. So we'll come with something like that. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If this is your first time, Michael Woe, haven't seen you in the show before. Thank you for being here. If you like what you heard, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We are on the precipice of 6,000 subscribers. Please send us that way. Tell us your friends, tell your spouses, your children, anyone who might like this conversations like this. Check us out on our podcast links. Links are in the description below. Have a good weekend, everyone, and we will talk to you next week.